much, Simon. Yeah, my name's Ben, and I'm one of the two co-founders of Ronin Pentest. And our objective in setting up the scanning tools was really to attempt to automate as much as possible the external pen testing process. Partly because we both worked for large corporations and found that for them, security was something of a box-ticking exercise rather than a holistic process that they were putting themselves through, which we found a little bit dispiriting, having spent long years learning how to do the skills, feeling that we weren't able to fully exercise them became a little bit frustrating. And partly out of an awareness that pen testing being as expensive as it is, it's not accessible to a huge proportion of the companies out there. And so we thought if we can automate the process as much as possible, then we can drive down the costs and make it available to hopefully a wider range of companies to benefit from.
So who's the target market for your product? I think that's quite important.
Well, I think it's small and medium-sized enterprises, any businesses, anything from a one-man band up to 200 or 300 people in a company, possibly even more.
Yeah. And do you see it also as a tool? So I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think the way Ben saw this coming to market and how I'm seeing it now coming to market are slightly different, in that the end user of that SME who Ben's talking about, who will benefit from this, there's a missing link there. I think Marcel and I have briefly had a chat about it by message as well, about the education gap between their understanding of what it is they actually need. And I see this tool as helping people bridge that in a way. And again, I'll put my mute on, so I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, well, that comes back to the same sort of that frustration of where you go into a large company to do a pen test, and you're assigned a scope, which is this particular URL or this particular batch of IP addresses, and you do your own personal research and realize that, okay, we've tested those bits that were in scope and that's all good, but that's not the full extent of the attack interface that the company exposes. And because the scope is being defined by the administrators from that company, there's bits that they're happy to have looked at, and there might be bits that they're not so happy to have looked at. And so those don't get included in the scope, and those are going to be the soft targets that an attack is going to go for. So while I can't compel people in the larger companies to revise their approach, what I can do is explain that approach clearly to people in smaller organizations, who can then hopefully take advantage of that information and apply it to themselves.
Yeah, and the magic, I think, Ben, is how easy the tool is, isn't it?
That's the idea. Yeah, we tried to take having, as I said, spent long and sometimes painful hours learning how to use various tools. And trying to save other people the bother of doing that, so that they can get straight on to analyzing the results and fixing the issues.
So is this the tool that it's aimed at internal IT or cybersecurity departments to run? So they can themselves.
Yes. Well, yeah, there's certainly a use for that. So, for instance, if you're, as an example, if you're a CISO and you want to know what interfaces you're exposing to the internet, what ports are open on them, and possibly what vulnerabilities are associated with those services. For instance, if you're running an out-of-date piece of software, then one thing you might do is book a pen test, wait for the time to elapse before the pen test happens, wait for another week for the report to come back, and then be able to take action. Or alternatively, with Ronin, you can just put the IP address in a scan, get your results in 10-15 minutes, and get on with your day. So it saves you a lot of time.
Marcin, your point there, Marcin, was, I think, mine, in that I see the target market for this product as cybersecurity professionals as much as I do, or more than I do, SMEs at the moment. And that's where I've kind of been trying to lead Ben with regards to launching it, because I don't think that we've got the understanding, even with what I would call, if I look back a few years when I had my own business, which is not big, but I had 25 staff and we outsourced our IT to another provider, a company. We didn't talk about cybersecurity at all at that point, and I don't think there are many companies like that who support businesses out there who are competent enough to even use, they could use your tool, Ben, but they wouldn't understand what the output meant. So I still think you need that, still need a professional involved in this.
Sure. Well, I guess if you're the CISO or the CEO or the decision maker who decides that you want to be scanned, then you'll get your output, and then you'll take them to your web developer or your network administrator or whoever actually runs things on a tech level for you, and say these are some problems that you need to address.
Well, you see, from my experience, unless the pen testing or vulnerability testing becomes part of your process, it never actually does any good to the company, because big companies, come on, they would do it once a year because often they have to do it as a legal requirement.
Yes.
They would source somebody to do it, usually the cheapest company, to tick box the exercise, and then they read the report and they either don't fully understand what is involved in fixing it, or simply they have no resources to allocate to that. And that's my experience from various.
I quite agree with you, and the idea of that Ronin can help with that is that instead of just doing a single pen test once a year, they can run, because the pen test is expensive, so that's a draw on resources financially. But if they're using the Ronin scanner, then they can run the scans much more regularly, and then you actually get to see the changes in your network over time, which is actually much more informative than a single snapshot in one given time. So if you're able to run the scans at your convenience and more frequently than once a year, I would suggest, then you get a picture of how things change over time, and hopefully that will the savings on the pen testing will then free up your resources to actually have people spend time on remediation.
And I think Ben and Marcel as well, this is the whole thing about changing that culture and getting people to implement this as part of that process, and that is why I've been quite excited about this.
Moving away from that tick box approach.
And whilst Ben will be the first to admit, it will never completely replace a manual pen test, because there's still bits and pieces you need to do. I think he's automated every part of it that's automatable, and it's Burp Suite, isn't it, an open VAS that it pulls together,
and a few other bits and pieces on the open source scanning as well.
I see Larry's got his hand up. Larry, have you got a question?
Yes. Hey Ben, real quick. On the report that it puts out, does it put them in order of severity?
Oh, you're gonna love it, Larry. You're taking the thunder away. You're gonna love it.
Hey, I'm not a party ruiner as much as you try to sell me around. I think you're slacking.
I know that.
All right, thanks. I was just inquiring about that.
The severities is critical, high, medium, low, and information. So we broadly break them down into that, but where CVE references are appropriate, we include them in the report as well.
Right, go on then, Ben. Come on, Ben. Wheel it out. Wheel the tool out.
Okay, right. Let me share my screen and let's get on with the demo. Okay. Right. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the website landing page. The most important bit before I log in is to show you the scan services page, which is where we've got the pricing and also actual definitions and explanations of the different scan types. So if you're starting from a position of not actually knowing what you want to scan or how you want to scan it, then there's a bit of information there to get you started. And then after that, I'll log into the dashboard, my test account.
Make sure you leave those credentials visible.
I change them regularly, don't worry. So the first thing to note here is that we've got this alert, which is pointing out that I've got 3 scans that are going to be deleted. The reason for that is that we delete all scans after 30 days in order to prevent ourselves from becoming a large and hack-worthy repository of other people's information. So it's important to bear in mind that you need to download your report in a timely fashion, or after 30 days, it will disappear. But with that said, I'll move on. So this is the dashboard that you initially land on. You want to create a scan. And in this example, I'm going to do an open source intelligence scan first. This is kind of like the virtualization of the reconnaissance phase of a pen test. So I'll show you how the scan goes, and then I've got a report I can show you. So just adding a reference for my own purposes. You can put anything you want in there, except the terms and conditions, which basically means that you have the rights to scan the site. So you're either an owner or an administrator, or have administrative rights. The privacy policy just gives us the rights to hold the report information under GDPR. And then you select your scan type. So I'm going to go for OSINT first, and say that I've already backed up. Not having backups obviously is a vulnerability in itself, so we try to encourage people throughout the whole process to stick with best practice. And here you can see my open source intelligence scan for example.com is here and ready to go. So I'm actually going to jump over to my example report because I don't actually want to scan example.com because they are a real domain.
How much is it, Ben?
The open source intelligence scan is £150.
Thank you.
And the reason for that is basically before we put the tool together, it would have taken about a day's work to pull together this much information and to format it into a report. So we thought that 150 was about the right sort of level for it.
It sounds too cheap to me. But...
Well, I'm sure there's others who'd say the opposite. So this is the report that gets produced, and I'll take you through it. There's a brief summary. There's an explanation of who the target was, who the account who ran the scan was, when the data was run was. A quick high-level summary at the top of the report, and then down into the detailed findings. And the first section is compromised email addresses. So these are email addresses that have been included in known cyber breaches. Some of them date back quite a long time ago. The LinkedIn one was 2015. The PDL one, I think, was even before that. But the database is regularly maintained as new breaches occur. So any email addresses that occur in this compromised accounts list should definitely have some attention paid to them, and possibly have their passwords updated and the two-factor authentication enabled in order to make sure that no one's in there and doing bad things.
I think importantly there, Ben, if I could just jump in, the bit I really like is that you've got the remediation and recommendation section there, which then covers all
so it gives you a bit more idea of things that you can and should be doing if you've got email accounts that are showing up in this list. The second one is just a Google's search of email addresses associated with the domain. These can be, if they're accessible to our tool, then they're accessible to attackers. So these are probably the most likely email addresses that would be subject to phishing campaigns, for example. So again, email addresses that appear on this list, it's worth taking a little bit of extra care with them, paying a bit more attention to what's going on with them. And possibly even you may find email accounts which belong to staff members who are no longer with the company. And it might be an opportunity to have a cull and go and disable some unnecessary accounts. So just a useful information, and information that an attacker would certainly be taking advantage of if they were targeting your organization. Here we've got a similar list in a bit more detail. Again, it's not the email addresses, but it's the staff members' names and their roles within the organization. So again, potential targets for phishing campaigns, and just to raise awareness that these identifiers are out in the public realm.
And obviously, this is a sample site that you've used.
Yeah.
And I take it, so this is typically quite a lot of information compared to what you'd normally get back, or am I wrong in saying that?
I've taken one that was relatively juicy and done anonymization on it. So, then we do a domain lookup and find out what the IP address associated with that domain is, just by using NS lookup. And so we tell you which ports on that server are open, just in case there's anything unexpected that comes up. You might have an unknown FTP or who knows, maybe even a telnet. But again, things that might be useful to know about. Then we've got DNS enumeration, and this comes back to one of the major problems that people seem to face, which is not having a full and up-to-date asset inventory. So if you don't know what all your external interfaces are, then you can't test them all, so you can't be confident that they're all secure. So this does a reverse DNS lookup on the domain in order to isolate subdomains. And then as a sort of off-screen task, what you can do is do an NS lookup on each of those subdomains and add any IP addresses that don't match to the one shown above to the list of ones that you'll scan in the infrastructure scanning phase, which comes next. Yeah, useful information there. And then this one is enumeration of domains that look similar to the target domain that the tool's been given. And these are ones that are available for purchase. So an attacker might be able to buy up one of these domains and then send emails from a more convincing phishing platform. So it's a way of increasing their potential hit rate on phishing campaigns. And these are some fairly obvious examples. You can go into Unicode and get a lot more advanced with this, but it gives you some ideas of resources that you might want to keep an eye on, or possibly even purchase in order to prevent other people doing so, depending on the scale of the organization. So that is a run through of the whole of the OSINT report.
That's what you would say is as automated as you can get for that first stage of what you would call a penetration test.
Yeah, for the reconnaissance phase of the penetration test.
Yeah, cool. So then the next stage would be.
So once you've been through, you've changed the passwords for the accounts that may have been compromised. You've done your NS lookups and got a full list of your external interfaces. Then you can go back to the scanner, create a new scan. And I'll just go back to the dashboard. Actually, I've got one. Here's one I did earlier. So
while we're talking about that, here's one I did earlier. This is really relevant as well. How long do the scans take?
So you can see that this OSINT scan that I did here took 2 minutes 48 seconds.
Yeah. And the bigger scans, they tend to take about 10 minutes. Is that right?
On average, yes. And the web scans can vary a lot more. Sometimes they can run into hours, depending on the size of the size of the website. Sure. But OSINT tends to be pretty quick. Then the next quickest is infrastructure, which I'll do next. And then web can take a bit longer, but in the examples that I've got here, for instance, they take about 10 minutes, 12 minutes.
And I think whilst you're moving on to that next page, I think the people who are on the call who are perhaps newer to the industry, who've got maybe more of an understanding of the underneath the bonnet than I have, will already start to see how they could use something like this to start charging people for work. Is kind of where I've been looking at it from, because if you've got an understanding of how this works, when you've all seen all the other aspects to it as well, I think you'll see from my point of view that you could potentially use this to earn yourself a fair few pennies. So
that's the end of the game. So yes, with the infrastructure scans, you can put a maximum of 15 IP addresses in, separated by commas. We find after 15 IP addresses, the reports get a bit ungainly, or they can be. So We've restricted it to that. But again, all you need to do is go to create scan, put your IP address in here, 1 or up to 15. Give yourself a reference. Select accept the terms and conditions and the privacy policy. Select infrastructure paid, backed up, verify, and I didn't give it an IP address, so it's errored. But
so when you say paid, why is there the option?
I'm going to do that bit next. I'm
Cool.
I'm just rushing through the infrastructure bit, and then I'm going to repeat it again with the web app and actually complete the process so you can see it all the way through. So if I go to create a web scan, jump my target in here.
When you do those tests, you have to pay for credits, however you charge this. But if I want to retest it in a week time, do I have to pay again the same amount, or how does this work?
The retest is 50% of the original.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So I'll accept the terms and conditions, select web paid, select already backed up, and it's with the web apps where this verify button is actually important. Because what this is doing is running a script which checks on this side whether the target is protected by a web application firewall or not. And if it is protected by a web application firewall, then we need to whitelist the IP addresses for Ronin through the firewall in order to be confident of getting results. Otherwise, we'll likely just get an IP ban and no results will come out at the end. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And if you click on the little assistant helper down here on the corner, the IP addresses to whitelist are provided there. So we can go ahead from here and select create scan. I will hit pay now, and you can see I've got 30 credits in my bank. I'll have 20 credits remaining after the scan, so I'll select pay with my credits.
And the cost with this scan, Ben?
Is £85. No, £75, forgive me, £75. Here we've got the ability to schedule the scan for a time and date in the future, in case you want to test the website in the middle of the night when it's under low load and you don't want to wake up to actually press go in the middle of the night. So you can schedule the scan for a future time, but I'm going to go for right now. So you can see that it changes from schedule to start now if there's a date in there or not. So I'll hit start now. And you can see that the runtime has started. And if I move all you guys out of the way over here, I can click on the log. And you can you can basically follow the scan as it goes along in the log section. And it adds details telling you first that it's... Actually, I'll use one that's already done earlier, and you'll be able to see. So this one, for example. So you can see it's the first phase is it's crawling the website, and it gives you a percentage completion. Then it moves on to auditing the website, gives you an ongoing count of the number of requests that have actually been sent to the target, and then at the end, scan complete and report generated. So another feature that we have is once the scan is completed, you can go to the details page where you get a high-level overview of the different severities of the bugs that you found. You can download a CSV for use remotely or locally to you, remotely from us. And another thing you can do is, this is sort of in anticipation of a retest, is you can select certain different issues as resolved. So take off the ones that you fixed, and then you can run a retest, and then you can compare whether we think the issues are fixed compared to whether you think they're fixed. Go on, back. There we go. And another, so the retest option is in the dashboard here below, and when you hit that, the target is pre-populated and the scan type is pre-populated, just to make sure you're comparing like for like. But apart from that, it's just the same process as starting a scan initially. And to show you the final thing, which is the web application report, you can see we're only 2 minutes in, so it's got a little ways to go. I'll just check the log. It's still crawling, but it'll be auditing in just a moment. And yeah, web application report. So here's one I did earlier. And again, it's got the scan details at the top, a bit of high-level recommendations and summary, and then it goes straight into the issues that have been found. And these are all custom write-ups that we've done ourselves, so they're hopefully as easy to follow as we can possibly make them. But I expect this is going to be an ongoing evolution. So you've got the high-level description at the top here. Then in the middle, you've got the payloads that were actually used to demonstrate the condition. And then you've got recommendations on remediation afterwards. Where it's possible, the page and vulnerable parameter will both be displayed here. And then the IP address and port that the server were running on are displayed below. And just we've got purple is critical, red is high risk. So for instance here you can see it's the file parameter is the one that's vulnerable, and the page is process.php. And yeah, all the way down, these are hopefully this is an intentionally vulnerable target, so hopefully our real clients won't be finding quite such a wide array of bad stuff when they get their reports back, but no doubt some do from time to time. And one thing I want to show you at the bottom is that when the tool reports an issue but with a low level of confidence, where's it gone? It gets marked as a false positive. So we include it for completeness, but we mark it as a potential false positive so that you don't put too much effort into fixing it when it may not be there. It's just a question of, if you get a false positive, you want to be checking your internal logs to see if you can find anything that correlates and see if you can match up what you can see on the inside from what we can see on the outside, and hopefully either confirm it to be an issue or bin it off.
Brilliant.
So that pretty much completes my 3-stage automated pen test demonstration. You do your reconnaissance first, then you test your infrastructure, and then you test your applications after that.